I learned I had been written out of my own life on a Monday morning, standing barefoot on cold tile, holding a wedding invitation that wasn't addressed to me. The envelope was thick, cream paper, gold foil, my parents' names printed neatly in the corner of their address in Ridgewood, Connecticut. Inside was an invitation to my younger sister's wedding. Everyone was listed: parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, even distant cousins I barely remembered. My name wasn't there, not as a guest, not as family, not anywhere. For a few seconds, I honestly thought it was a mistake, a printing error, something mundane. That's how denial works. It reaches for the simplest explanation first. Then my phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Did you get the mail I forwarded? We need to talk later." That was the moment my stomach dropped. Not because of the wedding, but because of the tone. Careful, preemptive. The tone people use when they've already decided something and are preparing to explain it to you, like it's for your own good. My name is Hannah Crowley. I'm 31 years old, and until that Monday morning, I believed I was a valued part of my family. I was wrong. 15 minutes later, I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee untouched, replaying the last few years in my head. Christmas dinners, where my seat had slowly shifted toward the edge of the table. Thanksgiving conversations that paused when I entered the room. Birthdays acknowledged with quick texts instead of calls. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to and say, "This is it." Just a gradual erosion. My younger sister, Melissa, had always been the center. 2 years younger, softer, louder, better at being seen. When we were kids, teachers called me independent. Melissa was expressive. Independent sounded like a compliment until you realized it was an excuse for neglect. Our parents, Thomas and Elaine Crowley, liked harmony, or at least the appearance of it. Conflict made them uncomfortable, and whenever something needed to be smoothed over, adjusted, absorbed, that responsibility quietly landed on me. I was the one who understood, the one who didn't take things personally, the one who could handle it. Until I couldn't. The wedding invitation wasn't the real shock. The real shock came 2 hours later when my brother Daniel called. Daniel is the oldest, 35, married, 2 kids. He's always played mediator, mostly because it allowed him to avoid choosing sides. "Hannah," he said, his voice already tired. "Mom asked me to call you." "I figured," I replied. There was a pause. I could hear traffic in the background. "They're saying it's complicated," he continued. "The guest list, the venue. Melissa's fiancé's family is very traditional." I waited. "They think it might be better if you don't come," he said finally. "Better for whom?" I didn't ask. I already knew the answer. "In the invitation?" I said. My name missing was intentional. Another pause. "Yeah," I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Okay. That's it?" he asked, surprised. "You're not going to say anything?" "I am," I said. "Just not to you." That night, my parents invited me over for dinner. They didn't call it a confrontation. They never did. They called it a conversation. Their house hadn't changed. Same manicured lawn, same family photos lining the hallway, same grandmother's portrait hanging just slightly crooked above the fireplace. The woman in that portrait, my grandmother Ruth, had died 3 years earlier. She'd been the only one who ever noticed when something was off. The only one who ever asked questions that made people uncomfortable. She'd also been the one who insisted I learn how things worked. Not just emotionally, but practically. How to read documents, how to ask for copies, how to never sign something you didn't understand. At the time, I thought she was just being cautious. Now I wondered if she'd seen this coming. Dinner was polite, controlled. My mother served lemon chicken like nothing was wrong. My father asked about my job at a logistics firm in Stamford. I answered briefly. No one mentioned the wedding until dessert. "Hannah," my mother said, folding her napkin carefully, "we need you to understand something." There it was. "Melissa's wedding is delicate," she continued. "Her future in-laws have certain expectations, and recent events have made things complicated." "What events?" I asked. My father cleared his throat. "Your decision to step away from the family business." I froze. "What?" I said. "You know," he replied. "The company. After Grandma passed, things shifted. You've been distant. The company, Crowley Holdings, a small but profitable real estate management firm my grandmother had built from the ground up. For years, I'd handled compliance reviews and vendor contracts, quietly, without a title, without equity. After my grandmother died, I'd been told everything would be discussed later. Later never came. I didn't step away, I said calmly. I was never invited back in. My mother waved her hand gently. That's not how we see it. Of course it wasn't. So, my father continued, Melissa feels that your presence might introduce tension, and on her wedding day, we want everything to be peaceful. Peaceful. The word people use when they don't want to admit they're choosing sides. In the invitation, I asked. We thought it would be easier this way, my mother said softly. Easier than honesty. I stood up. I understand, I said. They looked relieved. That hurt more than anything else. As I reached the door, my father added something that would stay with me for a long time. You've always been strong, Hannah. You'll land on your feet. Strong enough to exclude. Strong enough to sacrifice. Strong enough to lose quietly. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls. Just the hum of the road and a growing realization settling into my chest. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about being erased. And as I pulled into my driveway, something else occurred to me. Something my grandmother had once said, casually, like it didn't matter. Make sure you always know where your name appears on paper. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into the county records portal. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for answers. And what I found would change everything. I didn't find what I was looking for right away. That's important to say, because people assume moments like this come with a single document, a smoking gun, something obvious and cinematic. They don't. What I found instead were gaps, silences, small inconsistencies that didn't mean much on their own, but together formed a shape I didn't like. I searched property records first. Crowley Holdings owned 6 residential buildings and 2 small commercial properties across Fairfield County. I knew that much. I'd reviewed maintenance contracts for all of them at some point. What surprised me was how recently several ownership structures had changed. LLCs renamed, managers reassigned, signatures updated. My father's name appeared everywhere. My brother's too. Mine didn't. It was after midnight when I finally shut the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The apartment was quiet. No TV, no notifications. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. I wasn't angry yet. I was unsettled. The next morning, I called my Aunt Laura, my mother's sister. She lived in upstate New York and had always been polite but distant, like she'd learned early on to keep a safe emotional radius from my parents. Hannah, she said, surprised. It's been a while. I need to ask you something, I replied, and I need you to be honest. She paused. That depends. Did Grandma Ruth ever talk to you about her will? I asked. Silence stretched longer than it should have. Yes, Laura said finally. Why? Did she mention me? Another pause. Yes, she said again. Specifically. My heart thudded once. Hard. What did she say? I asked. Laura exhaled. She said you were the only one who asked questions, the only one who read things carefully. She said she trusted you. Trusted. Did she leave me anything? I asked. Laura hesitated. I assumed you knew. I don't, I said. The truth landed between us like a dropped glass. Hannah, she said slowly, your grandmother changed her will about 6 months before she passed. She told me she was putting safeguards in place. Safeguards? For whom? I asked. For you, Laura replied. That was the moment the ground shifted. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there staring at the wall, my mind replaying the last conversation I'd had with my grandmother in the hospital. She'd squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, and said, "Don't let them rush you after I'm gone." I thought she meant grief. I was wrong. That afternoon, I requested a copy of the will from the probate court. It was a public record. Anyone could access it. The clerk told me it would take a few days. A few days felt like a lifetime. In the meantime, my family acted like nothing had happened. My mother sent me a photo of Melissa's bridal shower. Pink balloons, champagne flutes, everyone smiling. No message, just the image. My brother sent a group text about Christmas plans, casually assuming I wouldn't be attending. I didn't respond. At work, I went through the motions. Meetings, emails, spreadsheets. But my focus kept drifting back to one thought. If my grandmother had put safeguards in place, why didn't I know about them? The answer came faster than I expected. 3 days later, I received an email from a law office I didn't recognize. Subject: Estate of Ruth Crowley. Notice of interested party. My hands were steady when I opened it. That surprised me. The email was formal, brief. It stated that I was listed as an interested party in my grandmother's estate, and that certain amendments had been filed but not fully executed due to subsequent actions by the executor. Executor. My father. I read the email twice, then the third time. Certain amendments had been filed but not fully executed. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew it mattered. I forwarded the email to my personal account and closed my work laptop early. Then I did something I'd never done before. I Googled estate litigation attorneys. The office I chose was in New Haven, an old brick building with frosted windows and a receptionist who didn't smile unless she meant it. The attorney's name was Victor Hale, mid-50s, calm, direct, no wasted words. He read the documents in silence while I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap. Your grandmother's will, he said finally, includes a conditional trust. Conditional how? I asked. It placed certain assets into a trust that would only fully transfer upon verification of compliance, he replied. Specifically, independent management review and beneficiary notification. Was that done? I asked. He shook his head. No. So where did the assets go? I asked. Temporarily, he said. They're held in limbo. Limbo. That doesn't sound legal, I said. It's not illegal, he replied, but it's risky. Especially if someone tried to act as though those conditions didn't exist. I thought of the LLC changes, the signatures, the quiet reassignment of control. Can they exclude me, I asked. From a wedding? He said lightly. Yes. From an inheritance structured this way? No. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Focus. What do I do? I asked. Victor leaned forward. First, you stop communicating informally. Second, you request formal accounting. Third, you don't confront anyone until we understand the full picture. I nodded. And one more thing, he added. You should prepare for them to act surprised. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was anxious, but because my mind was busy reinterpreting memories through a new lens. The way my father rushed the estate paperwork. The way my mother avoided discussing details. The way Melissa suddenly spoke about the company as if it were already hers. They hadn't just excluded me socially. They'd been removing me structurally. And the wedding? The wedding was cover. The next morning, I sent one email to my father. Subject: Estate documentation. Hi, Dad. I've been advised that I'm listed as an interested party in Grandma's estate. Please send me copies of all related documents and filings at your earliest convenience. Thanks. Hannah. I didn't add emotion. I didn't accuse. I waited. His reply came an hour later. Hannah, this isn't the time to dig up old paperwork. Let's focus on family harmony right now. We'll talk after the wedding. After the wedding. I stared at the screen and felt something click into place. They weren't postponing resolution. They were running out the clock. And for the first time since that invitation arrived, I understood exactly what I needed to do next. The probate clerk called me at 8:17 the next morning. Her voice was flat, practiced. Ms. Crowley, the amended filings you requested are ready for pickup. Today? I asked. Yes, she said. There was an acceleration request submitted late yesterday. By whom? I asked. She hesitated just long enough to answer without saying more than she had to. By counsel for the executor, my father. I thanked her and hung up. For a moment, I just stood in my kitchen, holding my phone, letting that sink in. He hadn't wanted to talk after the wedding. He wanted to finish something before I could stop it. I drove to the courthouse without music. I needed the quiet. The building smelled like old paper and disinfectant, the kind of place where decisions outlive emotions. The clerk handed me a thick envelope and asked me to sign a log. Her eyes flicked up to my face, then away again, like she already knew how this would go. I didn't open the envelope until I was back in my car. The first thing I saw was my grandmother's signature. Familiar. Careful. The kind of signature you make when you expect someone to study it later. The trust was real. So were the conditions. What wasn't real was the compliance certificate attached to it. It was dated 2 weeks after her death, signed by my father, countersigned by a consultant I didn't recognize. It stated that all beneficiaries had been notified and that an independent review had been completed. Neither of those things had happened. I felt something cold settle behind my eyes. This wasn't neglect. This was fabrication. I called Victor from the parking lot. "Tell me you're sitting down," he said, after I summarized what I'd found. "I'm fine," I replied. "Tell me what this means." "It means," he said carefully, "that someone certified facts that aren't true. That exposes them." "To what?" I asked. "Civil liability at minimum," he replied. "Potential criminal exposure if intent can be shown." I closed my eyes. My father had always framed himself as cautious, conservative, risk-averse. But desperation makes people sloppy. "What's the next step?" I asked. "We request the underlying documentation for the compliance review," Victor said. "Names, reports, correspondence. If it's real, they'll produce it. If it's not, they'll stall." "And if they stall?" I asked. "Then we file a formal objection," he replied, "and freeze everything." I thought of Melissa's wedding venue, the caterer, the band, the deposits. "Do it," I said. That afternoon, the silence from my family became noticeable. No texts, no photos, no group chat chatter. At 6:42 p.m., my mother called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hannah," she said, too brightly. "We need to talk." "I've been trying to," I replied. Her tone shifted. "Your father is very upset. He says you've involved lawyers." "I responded to an email from a law office," I said. "I didn't create the situation." She sighed, the long-suffering kind she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "You're making things harder than they need to be." "For whom?" I asked. "For everyone," she said. "This family doesn't need public drama." I pictured my grandmother in her hospital bed, squeezing my hand. "This isn't drama," I said. "It's documentation." My mother paused. "Why can't you just let this go?" "Because someone decided for me," I replied. "And they didn't have the right." Her voice sharpened. "Your father did what he thought was best." "For himself?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Melissa is under a lot of stress. The wedding is in 3 weeks." I almost laughed. "That's interesting timing," I said. "Hannah," she warned. "Mom," I replied calmly, "if you're calling to ask me to stay quiet until after the wedding, the answer is no." Silence. Then, very quietly, "You don't understand the consequences." "I do," I said. "I just don't accept them anymore." I hung up before she could say anything else. 2 days later, Victor forwarded me a response from my father's attorney. They acknowledged receipt of the request. They asked for 30 days to compile materials. 30 days. Victor called immediately. "They're buying time," he said, "which means they don't have what we asked for." "Then we don't give them 30 days, I replied. "No," he agreed. "We give them 7. The objection was filed that afternoon. The court issued a temporary stay on all asset transfers tied to the trust. Everything stopped, including the money my father had quietly earmarked for the wedding. That night, my brother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "What the hell are you doing?" he snapped without greeting. "Protecting myself," I said. "You're blowing everything up," he said. "Dad says you're trying to ruin Melissa's wedding." "That's not my objective," I replied. "But it's happening," he said. "Vendors are calling. Accounts are frozen." "That sounds inconvenient," I said. "You're being vindictive," he accused. I waited a beat. "No," I said. "I'm being precise." He scoffed. "You always had to be right." "I had to be careful," I corrected. "There's a difference." "You could have talked to us," he said. "I tried," I replied. "You excluded me." "That was Melissa's call," he said quickly. "Was the trust amendment also her call?" I asked. He went quiet. That was my answer. "You don't know what you're doing," he said finally. "Dad will never forgive you." I looked out my window at the streetlights flickering on, one by one. "I'm not asking him to," I said. I ended the call. The following week, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single photocopied page, a draft of my grandmother's final amendment, the one that hadn't been executed. It named me as co-trustee, not beneficiary, not advisor, control. Handwritten in the margin, in my grandmother's careful script, were 5 words. "If they rush you, stop." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that, because now I understood the full shape of what she'd tried to do and what my family had tried to prevent. They hadn't just cut me out, they had panicked. And panic always leaves a trail. The first subpoena landed the following Monday. It wasn't dramatic. No knocking at doors, no raised voices, just a certified envelope delivered to my father's office, requesting documents tied to the compliance review he had certified under oath. That word mattered. Oath. Victor explained it to me in his measured way. Once someone signs under penalty of perjury, intent becomes relevant. They can't claim ignorance forever. I pictured my father's signature again. Confident, familiar. The same signature he used on birthday cards and Christmas checks. The same hand that had taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 12. Hands don't change. Motives do. My phone stayed quiet for most of that day. Too quiet. Then, just after dinner, Melissa called. I let it ring until voicemail. She didn't leave a message. She texted instead. I don't know what your problem is, but you're humiliating us. I stared at the screen. There was no greeting, no question. Just an accusation wrapped in certainty. I typed, deleted, then typed again. This isn't about you. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then her reply came fast. Everything is about me right now. That's the point. There it was. Not anger. Not fear. Ownership. I didn't respond. The next day, I took a personal day from work and met Victor at his office again. He'd spread the documents across the conference table like puzzle pieces. They submitted a consultant report, he said, tapping one page. But it's generic. No site visits, no interviews, no dates. So it's fake, I said. It's decorative, he corrected. Designed to look complete if no one looks closely. And the beneficiary notification? I asked. He slid another page toward me. They claim notice was sent by certified mail. I scanned it. No tracking numbers. No receipts. They assumed you wouldn't check, Victor said. They assumed I wouldn't matter, I replied. He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. There's something else. He handed me a timeline. LLC changes, bank account modifications, authority updates. They moved assets into a holding entity 2 weeks before your grandmother passed, he said. Your brother was added as a signatory 3 days later. And me? I asked, already knowing the answer. Removed, he said. I felt it then. Not shock. Recognition. The exclusion hadn't been reactive. It had been planned. This started before she died, I said quietly. Yes, Victor replied. Which changes the tone of everything. How so? I asked. It suggests they anticipated resistance, he said. Or discovered. I thought of the way my father had rushed paperwork. The way my mother had deflected. The way Melissa had spoken as if decisions were already final. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had feared me. That afternoon, my mother showed up at my apartment. No warning, no call. I opened the door and saw her standing there with a familiar expression. Equal parts resolve and exhaustion. You look thin, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I'm fine, I replied. She sat at my kitchen table, smoothing the sleeve of her cardigan. This has gone far enough. I don't agree, I said. She sighed. Your father is under a lot of pressure. So am I replied. She waved a hand dismissively. This isn't the same. You don't have a family to protect. I looked at her. I am family. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, the trust was complicated. You know how your grandmother was. Careful? I asked. Paranoid, she said sharply. That word sat between us. She wasn't paranoid, I said. She was observant. My mother's jaw tightened. You always think you're the smartest person in the room. No, I said calmly. I think I'm paying attention. She leaned forward. If you keep pushing this, there will be consequences. I met her gaze. Like what? Her eyes flicked away. Relationships change. I know, I said. She stood abruptly. You're being selfish. I nodded once. For the first time. She left without saying goodbye. 2 days later, the wedding planner emailed the family group. There were issues with the venue contract. A payment hadn't cleared. Certain reservations were on hold. My brother called immediately after. This is on you, he said. Dad had to move funds around. That's not my responsibility, I replied. You're punishing Melissa, he said. No, I said. I'm refusing to subsidize lies. He laughed bitterly. You really think you're the victim here? I paused. I don't think in those terms anymore. What does that mean? He demanded. It means I'm not negotiating my dignity, I replied. The call ended with a click. That night, Victor emailed me a single sentence. We have confirmation the consultant does not exist. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, heart steady. The compliance certificate wasn't just inaccurate, it was fraudulent. Next steps, I typed. His reply came a minute later. We notify the court and request expanded discovery. Translation? We turn the lights on. The following week was a blur of filings, calls, and quiet panic on the other side. My father's attorney requested extensions, then mediation, then a private conversation. Victor declined all of it. They want to control the venue, he said. Public court records scare them. Good, I replied. On Friday afternoon, I received an email from my father. Subject, let's fix this. Hannah, you've made your point. We can talk. Privately. This doesn't need to go any further. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Victor. His response was immediate. It's already further. I closed my laptop and stood by the window, watching the city settle into evening. For the first time since all of this began, I felt something like calm, because the truth was no longer something I was chasing. It was something they were running from, and the distance between us was closing. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Not a trial, not a judgment, just a status conference. The kind of procedural step most people underestimate until they're sitting in a courtroom, realizing their private decisions are about to be discussed in public. Victor prepared me carefully. This isn't about winning, he said over the phone the night before. It's about control of the narrative. I'm not planning to speak, I replied. Good, he said. Silence reads as confidence. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Air-conditioned beyond comfort, as if discomfort were part of the design. My father arrived with his attorney, a man in an expensive gray suit who looked annoyed rather than worried. My mother sat beside them, hands folded tightly in her lap. Melissa wasn't there. That absence felt deliberate. When the judge entered, everyone stood. She was older, sharp-eyed, and efficient, the kind of woman who didn't waste time on performance. She reviewed the filings quickly, flipping pages with practiced speed. Mr. Crowley, she said, looking up at my father, you certified compliance with conditions attached to a conditional trust. That compliance is now being questioned. Yes, Your Honor, his attorney replied smoothly. The judge raised an eyebrow. I wasn't addressing counsel. The room shifted. Yes, my father said, his voice steady but tight. I believed the conditions were met. Believed, the judge repeated. Based on what? My father hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Based on professional review, he said. By whom? She asked. His attorney stepped in. Your Honor, we've requested additional time to locate. No, she interrupted. I asked a question. Silence stretched. My father cleared his throat. The consultant was recommended. By whom? She asked again. No answer. The judge leaned back slightly. I'm ordering expanded discovery effective immediately. All communications related to the trust, including drafts, emails, and third-party correspondence, are to be produced. She turned her gaze to my attorney. Ms. Crowley will be included as an interested party in all proceedings. She looked back at my father. Any further asset movement without court approval will be considered contempt. Gavel. Done. The hearing lasted less than 15 minutes. It felt like hours. Outside the courtroom, my father tried to speak to me. Hannah, he said, his voice low. We need to talk. Through counsel, I replied, not slowing my pace. My mother reached for my arm. I stepped aside. You're doing this to hurt us, she said, her voice trembling now. No, I replied. I'm doing this because you thought I wouldn't notice. Victor guided me toward the exit without another word. By Monday, the documents began to arrive. Email chains, drafts, notes, and with them, clarity. The trust amendment naming me co-trustee had been discussed, debated, delayed, then quietly shelved. Not because it was unclear, but because it shifted authority away from my father. One email from him stood out. We can revisit this later. Hannah doesn't need to be involved right now. Right now. As if my role were temporary. Another email, this one from my brother, made my jaw tighten. If Hannah pushes back, it'll complicate everything. Better to move fast. They hadn't just excluded me, they had strategized around me. Victor reviewed the files and nodded. This establishes intent, he said. Not criminal, but compelling. What does that mean? I asked. It means leverage, he replied. The court suggested mediation. Formal, documented, with a neutral facilitator. My father accepted immediately. I agreed. The mediation room was smaller, warmer, designed to soften edges. A long table, neutral art, bottled water lined up like a peace offering. My father spoke first. I never meant to cut you out, he said, eyes fixed on the table. I was trying to protect the family. By excluding me? I asked calmly. You're strong, he said. You didn't need the same things. There it was again. Strength as justification. My mother spoke next. We didn't think you wanted responsibility. I looked at her. You didn't ask. Melissa finally spoke, her voice sharp. This is ridiculous. Grandma was confused near the end. I slid a copy of the amendment across the table. Confused people don't draft conditional trusts with layered oversight, I said. The mediator cleared her throat. Let's focus on resolution. Victor leaned forward. Our position is simple. The trust amendment naming Hannah as co-trustee should be executed as intended. Any assets moved in violation of that intent should be returned. My father stiffened. That gives her veto power. It gives her accountability, Victor replied. The room went quiet. Melissa scoffed. So you want control now? I met her eyes. I want transparency. The mediator looked at my father. Given the documentation, that's a reasonable request. He looked tired then. Older. This will change everything, he said. Yes, I replied. It already has. The session ended without agreement, but something had shifted. That evening, my brother texted me. You could have settled this quietly. I replied with one line. You could have included me. The wedding was postponed the following week. Officially, due to venue issues. Unofficially, because the money wasn't moving anymore. Melissa blamed me, openly. I didn't respond. At work, I was offered a promotion, a role with real authority, real compensation. I accepted. That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about how quickly my life had split into before and after. Before, I was included conditionally. After, I was excluded, deliberately. And in that exclusion, I'd found something unexpected. Clarity. Because once people show you how easily they remove you, you stop confusing access with belonging. The next hearing was scheduled for December, and this time, the court would decide. December arrived quietly. No snowstorms, no dramatic shifts in weather, just a steady drop in temperature that matched the mood settling over my family like a thin layer of frost. The court ordered a full accounting. That was the phrase Victor used. Full accounting. It sounded clinical, harmless. It wasn't. It meant bank statements, internal emails, operating agreements, decision logs. It meant explaining line by line who authorized what, when, and why. It meant sunlight. My father stopped calling altogether. My mother sent one email that said only, I hope you know what you're doing. I didn't reply. At work, things stabilized in a way I hadn't expected. With the promotion came a strange sense of permission. I spoke more directly. I set firmer boundaries. I didn't apologize for decisions that were reasonable. I realized how much of my life had been spent bracing. The accounting process exposed something else too. Something I hadn't anticipated. Crowley Holdings wasn't as healthy as it appeared. Maintenance reserves had been borrowed against. Rental income had been redirected to cover shortfalls elsewhere. Nothing illegal, just thin. A house standing because someone kept reinforcing the beams without telling anyone they were cracking. That someone had been me. Years of conservative recommendations I'd made, quietly followed, quietly attributed to my father's instinct. Once I stepped away, those instincts turned optimistic, risk-tolerant, convenient. The numbers told the story clearly. Victor flagged it immediately. They need this trust stabilized, he said. Otherwise, they'll have to disclose weaknesses to lenders. And co-trusteeship complicates that, I said. Yes, he replied, because you'd ask questions. That night, my brother showed up at my apartment. I hadn't seen him in weeks. He looked exhausted. Tie loosened, eyes bloodshot. You didn't have to go this far, he said as soon as I opened the door. I stepped aside and let him in. He paced while I sat. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Dad? he asked. Yes, I replied. I do. He can't sleep, Daniel continued. He's under review. Banks are asking questions. I watched him carefully. Are they asking about the trust or about the business? He stopped pacing. That's not fair, he said. Is it accurate? I asked. He didn't answer. You know, I continued. You were added as a signatory before Grandma passed. His jaw tightened. Dad needed help. Did he ask me? I asked. Silence. You didn't think I'd notice, I said. Daniel sat down heavily. We thought you wouldn't want the mess. The mess you created? I asked calmly. He rubbed his face. Melissa's furious. She thinks you did this on purpose. For the wedding? I asked. For control, he snapped. I nodded once. Control is what you took without asking. He looked at me then. Really looked. As if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. You're different, he said. I'm not, I replied. I'm just not buffering anymore. He left an hour later, without resolution. The hearing took place the week before Christmas. This time, Melissa attended. She sat stiffly beside my parents, eyes fixed forward, jaw set. The judge reviewed the accounting summary. Her questions were sharp. Why were maintenance reserves diverted? Why was the trust amendment delayed? Why was a non-existent consultant cited? Each answer came slower than the last. Finally, the judge looked directly at my father. This court is concerned, she said, with the pattern of unilateral decision-making that contradicts the expressed intent of the decedent. She paused. The trust amendment naming Hannah Crowley as co-trustee reflects a desire for oversight, not exclusion. This court intends to honor that intent. My father's shoulders slumped slightly. She continued. Effective immediately, the amendment will be executed. Ms. Crowley will assume co-trustee responsibilities. Any further deviations will require joint approval. The gavel fell. Just like that. No celebration. No confrontation. Authority restored through process. Outside the courtroom, Melissa confronted me. You're ruining everything, she said, her voice shaking. No, I replied. I'm stopping the quiet damage. You didn't even want this before, she accused. I wasn't allowed to, I said. She stared at me. You're not welcome at the wedding. I nodded. I know. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat with the weight of it all. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't begged. I hadn't taken revenge. I'd simply stopped consenting to being erased. Christmas came and went, quietly. No invitation, no gifts, no calls. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I felt light. Because when control is mistaken for love, distance becomes freedom. But the story wasn't over yet. Becoming co-trustee meant responsibility, and responsibility would force the truth even further into the open. What I didn't know yet was how far my family would go to avoid it. Becoming co-trustee didn't feel like power. It felt like weight. The first box of documents arrived 2 days after Christmas, delivered by courier to my apartment. Bank statements, property assessments, internal memos, years of decisions condensed into paper and numbers. I stacked them neatly on my dining table and stared at them longer than I should have. This was what my grandmother had been protecting. Not money, not legacy, visibility. Victor walked me through my responsibilities carefully. No drama, no triumph. You don't act emotionally, he said. You act procedurally. Every decision documented. Every request in writing. I nodded. That part felt natural. What didn't feel natural was how quickly my family's tone changed once they realized I wasn't backing down. My father sent a formal email for the first time in my life. Subject: Trust Operations Coordination. He addressed me as Ms. Crowley, not Hannah. He proposed monthly meetings, structured agendas, clear divisions of authority. It read like something drafted by counsel, not a father writing to his daughter. I replied, just as formally. Subject: Trust Operations Coordination. Acknowledged. Please include full financial disclosures prior to any meeting. No greeting. No sign-off. At work, my promotion was announced company-wide. Congratulations emails came in throughout the day. People I barely knew stopped by my desk to shake my hand. For a moment, I felt something dangerously close to validation. Then I remembered how conditional validation had always been in my family. I let it pass. The first co-trustee meeting took place in a neutral conference room downtown. No family home advantage, No emotional territory. My father arrived early. My brother joined via video. Melissa declined to attend. Victor sat beside me, quiet, watchful. We reviewed the numbers, slowly, deliberately. Every time I asked a question, my father stiffened. Why was this loan extended without reserve coverage? Why was this vendor approved without competitive bids? Why were distributions made before maintenance obligations were met? These were operational decisions, he said at one point, irritation creeping in. They were trust-funded assets, I replied. That makes them fiduciary decisions. The room went quiet. My brother spoke up from the screen. You're making this impossible. No, I said calmly. I'm making it visible. By the end of the meeting, it was clear what had been happening. Short-term stability had been prioritized over long-term health. Appearances over structure. Control over accountability. My father looked older than I'd ever seen him. The next escalation came from an unexpected place, Melissa's fiancé's family. They requested clarification on financial arrangements tied to the wedding venue. Apparently, certain guarantees had been implied, but never documented. I wasn't copied on the email, but I was mentioned. Suddenly, my name was attached to decisions again. Quietly. Conveniently. Victor flagged it immediately. They're trying to shift responsibility, he said. Don't let them. I sent one email. I am not involved in personal expenditures or guarantees unrelated to trust obligations. Please direct all such inquiries to the appropriate parties. That was it. The response was immediate. Melissa called me for the first time since the hearing. How could you embarrass me like that? She demanded. I corrected the record, I replied. You could have handled it privately, she said. I wasn't consulted privately, I said. She laughed, sharp and brittle. You think you're so righteous now. I think I'm careful, I replied. You always ruin things, she snapped. I paused. No, I said. I just stopped pretending. She hung up. That night, my mother sent a message. You've changed. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Yes, that was all. The real turning point came a week later, buried in a line item I almost skipped. A consulting fee, paid quarterly, to a familiar name. My cousin, Mark. He wasn't listed as an employee, or a vendor, or a contractor, just paid. I cross-referenced the payments. They coincided with key asset shifts, approvals, timing changes. Victor reviewed it and frowned. This should have been disclosed, he said. It wasn't, I replied. Which makes it problematic, he said, especially given his relationship to the executor. I thought of Mark. Family dinners, easy jokes. The way he'd always asked vague questions about the business. Not malicious, just opportunistic. Do we pursue it? I asked. Victor met my eyes. That depends. Do you want resolution, or do you want truth? I thought about the wedding I wouldn't attend, the house I no longer visited, the family photos that no longer included me. I want the truth, I said. The inquiry letter went out the next morning. Formal, neutral, precise. Within hours, my Aunt Laura called. Hannah, she said, her voice low, what are you doing? I'm following the paper trail, I replied. You're tearing the family apart, she whispered. No, I said. I'm revealing where it was already split, she sighed. Your father is spiraling. I know, I said. Is that what you want? She asked. I closed my eyes. I want integrity. Silence. By the end of the week, Mark's payments were suspended pending review. He called me once, left a voicemail. We're family. You didn't have to do this. I deleted it, because family had never stopped them from doing it to me. The wedding date was officially postponed. Again. This time, there was no excuse offered, just silence. And in that silence, something else became clear. My absence wasn't the problem. My compliance had been. And now that it was gone, the structure they'd built on top of it was starting to tilt. Not because I asked them to, but because truth has a way of attracting attention once it's exposed. The first call came from someone I didn't know. A woman introduced herself as Karen Willis, Senior Compliance Officer for the regional bank that held several of the trust's commercial accounts. Her voice was calm, practiced, the kind that never called without a reason. We've been reviewing recent documentation, she said. Your name appears as co-trustee on updated filings. That's correct, I replied. There are discrepancies we'd like clarification on, she said. Nothing urgent, but we'll need a formal meeting. When I hung up, I didn't feel fear. I felt confirmation. The second call came from the county assessor's office. Routine, they said. A reassessment triggered by changes in reporting. Then an email from an accounting firm my father had used for years, requesting updated authorization forms. The outside world was noticing. At the next co-trustee meeting, my father was different, quieter, less combative. He brought folders. He took notes. My brother joined late and said very little. Victor laid out the agenda: bank review, compliance questions, asset documentation gaps. This is overkill, my brother muttered. This is standard, Victor replied evenly. What's unusual is how long it was avoided. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end of it, the word audit had been spoken out loud, not as a threat, as a possibility. That night, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood in the hallway, coat still on, purse clutched to her chest like a shield. I didn't know where else to go, she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit. She paced. Your father can't sleep, she said. Your brother's marriage is hanging by a thread. People are talking. I know, I said. You don't have to keep pushing, she said. You've made your point. I looked at her carefully. You think this is about a point? I said. She stopped pacing. Isn't it? No, I replied. It's about accuracy. She scoffed. Accuracy doesn't matter more than family. That's where we disagree, I said. Accuracy is what keeps family from becoming a lie. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She rarely did. You always had to be right, she said. I shook my head. I just stopped being wrong for you. She left without another word. The audit didn't begin officially. Not yet, but the preparatory questions kept coming. Requests for invoices, justifications for transfers, explanations for decisions made without minutes or votes. Victor handled most of it. I reviewed. I signed. I didn't gloat. I didn't escalate. I simply didn't interfere. Melissa sent a message late one night. I didn't think it would go this far. I stared at the screen. Neither did I typed back. But it already had. She didn't respond. A week later, my brother's tone shifted entirely. He asked for coffee. Public place. Neutral ground. He arrived early, eyes tired, suit rumpled. This has to stop, he said without preamble. I'm not doing anything, I replied. You're letting things happen, he said. Yes, I said. I am. That's worse, he snapped. I sipped my coffee. Only if what's happening shouldn't be. He leaned forward. What do you want? The question surprised me. Not because it was asked, but because it had never been asked before. I want clean records, I said. Clear boundaries. No assumptions made on my silence. He scoffed. And then what? Then I live my life, I replied. He laughed bitterly. You think they'll forgive you? I'm not asking them to, I said. His jaw tightened. You know this could ruin Dad. I know, I said. He should have known that too. He stared at me for a long moment. You always did this, made things moral. I smiled faintly. You always made them convenient. He stood abruptly and left. The audit notice arrived 3 days later. Formal. Polite. Unavoidable. An external firm retained to conduct a limited review of trust operations and affiliated entities. Limited, but thorough. My father didn't call me. He sent a message. We need to talk, I replied. We can discuss it with counsel present. No response. At work, my life felt strangely normal. Meetings, deadlines, small victories. Colleagues who had no idea my family was unraveling in parallel. I preferred it that way. The review uncovered what I already suspected. Not crimes, not fraud, but a pattern. Informal decisions treated as policy. Family loyalty substituting for oversight. Boundaries blurred until no one remembered where authority ended and entitlement began. The auditors called it systemic risk. Victor called it inevitable. The recommendation was clear: restructuring, independent oversight, reduced discretionary control. My father lost his role as sole decision-maker. My brother was removed from any advisory position tied to compensation. Melissa's wedding trust was frozen, pending separation from core assets. No one screamed. No one slammed doors. They simply stopped calling. At the final meeting, my father wouldn't look at me. Victor summarized the changes. Papers were signed. When it was over, my father stood slowly. This was never supposed to be you, he said quietly. I met his gaze. It was never supposed to be anyone, I replied. That's the problem. He nodded once and left. I sat there long after the room emptied, not triumphant, not broken, just clear. I had taken back nothing tangible. No house, no money, no apology. What I took back was authorship. And now, with the structure reset, a different question remained. What would I do with the space where compliance used to live? Because walking away is one thing. Choosing what you walk toward is another. The first morning after the audit closed, I woke up with no messages, no missed calls, no emails marked urgent, no calendar reminders tied to family obligations disguised as responsibility. The quiet felt unnatural. For years, silence had meant something was wrong, that someone was disappointed, that I had missed a cue, failed to anticipate a need, ignored a subtle demand I was supposed to sense without being told. This silence was different. It didn't accuse me. It didn't ask for anything. It simply existed. I made coffee and stood by the window of my apartment, watching commuters move through the gray morning like clockwork. For the first time since the hearing, I didn't feel braced for impact. I felt unassigned. At work, my calendar was full again, but this time it was filled with my name, my projects, my decisions. No invisible weight attached. Around noon, Victor emailed me a short note. All restructuring documents finalized. You are no longer required to attend trust meetings unless formally requested. Translation: you are free. That afternoon, my mother sent one final message. Your father is selling the house. I read it twice. The house wasn't just a property. It was the center of gravity, the place every holiday revolved around. The unspoken proof that everything was still intact, no matter how strained it felt inside. I typed back, I hope he finds something that fits him. She didn't respond. That evening, I went to dinner alone, a small Italian place near my apartment. I ordered pasta, a glass of wine, dessert. I didn't rush. I didn't check my phone. Halfway through my meal, I realized something that startled me. I wasn't thinking about them. Not my father, not my brother, not Melissa. I was thinking about a conversation I'd had months earlier with a colleague who'd asked me why I never applied for leadership roles. You already lead, she'd said. You just don't claim it. At the time, I'd laughed it off. Now, it landed differently. The next shift came quietly, not with confrontation, but with distance. An invitation arrived for my cousin's birthday dinner. I declined politely. No explanation. A family group chat reactivated briefly. I muted it. No announcements. No declarations, just small, firm boundaries that didn't ask for permission. 2 weeks later, I received a forwarded email from Victor. The trust board has agreed to appoint an independent director for long-term governance. Your role will shift to advisory only, effective immediately. Optional participation. Optional. I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair. They had finally done what my grandmother intended. They removed reliance on me entirely. And for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like completion. The retaliation I had braced for never came. No lawsuits, no public accusations, no dramatic family blow-ups. Just a slow retreat. I heard through others that Melissa's wedding went forward quietly. Downsized, relocated. I wasn't invited. I didn't ask why. My brother took a job out of state. Consulting. Temporary, he said. I suspected permanent. My father moved into a smaller place near the coast. No office, no staff, no titles. They weren't destroyed. They were reduced. And I realized something unsettling. That reduction wasn't my revenge. It was the natural consequence of removing someone who had been holding everything together without authority. I hadn't taken power from them. I had simply stopped supplying it. The real turning point came on an ordinary Thursday. My boss called me into her office and closed the door. We're restructuring the department, she said. There's an opening I think you should take. She slid a document across the desk. Senior Director. Expanded scope. Full autonomy. I looked at the title, then at her. You don't have to decide today, she said. I already have, I replied. That night, I packed away the last box of trust-related documents I'd kept out of habit. I slid them into the back of a closet and shut the door. I didn't feel the need to burn anything, or shred it. The story no longer needed proof. The proof was how quiet my life had become. Still, one thing remained unresolved. My grandmother. Not her estate, not her intentions, but her voice. I found it one afternoon while sorting through old emails. A voicemail she'd left me years ago that I'd never deleted. I played it. "Hannah," her voice said, steady, warm. "If you ever feel like you're disappearing to keep the peace, stop. Peace that requires your silence isn't peace. It's control. And control always has a cost." I sat there long after the message ended. She had known. She had seen it long before I did. The final piece fell into place not with a conversation, but with a decision I made alone. I unsubscribed from every family obligation I still carried internally. The guilt, the vigilance, the habit of explaining myself. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need vindication. What I needed was to choose myself without negotiating the choice. Because freedom isn't loud, but it is permanent. Freedom didn't arrive as relief. It arrived as exposure. Once the constant noise of obligation disappeared, there was nothing left to hide behind. No one to anticipate, no roles to play, no emotional weather to prepare for before every phone call. Just space. And space has a way of asking uncomfortable questions. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you're not needed? Who are you when your value isn't extracted by others? I didn't answer those questions right away. I filled my days instead. Work, long walks after dinner, cleaning my apartment with almost ritual precision. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I didn't explain myself. Still, something felt unfinished. Not with them, with me. The first crack came during a leadership retreat my company hosted outside the city. 2 days of workshops, strategy sessions, and carefully curated vulnerability. I expected to endure it. I didn't expect to speak. But during a breakout session, someone asked a question meant to spark discussion. What's one thing you've stopped doing to keep others comfortable? The room went quiet. I felt the answer rise in my chest before I had time to filter it. I stopped disappearing, I said. A few people nodded. One woman across the table met my eyes and smiled, like she understood exactly what I meant. Later that night, she introduced herself. Lydia. She ran a division in another state, mid-40s, direct. "You weren't talking about work, were you?" she asked. I smiled. "No." "Good," she said, because neither was I. We talked for hours, about family, about inheritance that felt more like a leash than a gift, about the quiet ways women are trained to absorb tension so others don't have to. "You didn't burn the house down," she said at one point. "You just walked out with the keys." That line stayed with me. A month later, I received an invitation I almost ignored. A mediation request from my father. He didn't ask to reconcile. He didn't apologize. He asked to close accounts. The message was brief. "I want to resolve what's left, professionally." I forwarded it to Victor. He replied an hour later, "Legally appropriate, emotionally unnecessary. Your call." I thought about it for a day. Then I agreed. The meeting took place in Victor's office. Neutral, clean, quiet. My father arrived alone. He looked smaller, not weaker, just less certain. We didn't hug. We reviewed documents, signed releases, transferred remaining authority. At the end, he cleared his throat. "I thought if I gave everyone what they wanted," he said slowly, "we'd be safe." I said nothing. "I didn't see that I was asking you to disappear," he continued. I looked at him then. "Did you know?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just a fraction too long." "I knew you would handle it," he said. That was his answer. I stood. "Then you got what you expected." I left without shaking his hand. It didn't feel cruel. It felt complete. The final echo came weeks later, quietly, in the mail. A letter from my mother, handwritten. She didn't defend herself. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She wrote about her own mother, about being taught to smooth things over, about believing love meant endurance. I read it once. Then I put it away. Some truths don't require a response. By spring, my life had settled into something almost unrecognizable. I hosted dinners, traveled without reporting my whereabouts, Took up pottery of all things, because working with my hands felt grounding. I stopped being hyper-competent in rooms that didn't respect me. And something else happened. People started meeting me where I stood. Not above, not below, with curiosity. The revenge everyone expects in stories like this never came. No courtroom spectacle, no public humiliation. The tables didn't turn dramatically, they simply stopped being my responsibility. And that, I learned, is the most destabilizing shift of all. Because when you remove yourself from a system built on your silence, the system doesn't collapse loudly. It starves. Not with them, but with the part of me that almost stayed. The confrontation I hadn't planned for came on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. No phone call, no letter, no meeting request. It came from memory. I was cleaning out a drawer in my bedroom, the kind that collects things you don't know where else to put. Old chargers, receipts, birthday cards. I found a small envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers, yellowed at the edges. My handwriting. I recognized it immediately. It was a note I'd written to myself years ago, folded until the creases were soft. I don't remember exactly when I wrote it. I only know why. Back then, I had been exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. The kind of tired that comes from constantly scanning the room for emotional landmines. I must have written it after one of those nights when I lay awake replaying conversations, wondering how I could have said something differently to keep the peace. The note was short, just a list. Don't forget to call Dad. Check in with Melissa about the venue. Make sure Mom isn't upset. Don't rock the boat. Don't make it worse. I sat on the floor with the note in my hands for a long time. That was the version of me who almost stayed. Not because I didn't see what was happening, but because I believed my presence was the only thing holding everything together. That belief had been my last chain. I realized then that the hardest part of walking away wasn't losing them. It was forgiving myself for staying as long as I did, for all the moments I minimized my own discomfort because it seemed easier than watching theirs. For every time I accepted a smaller version of my life so theirs could remain uninterrupted. That afternoon, I didn't cry. I folded the note carefully and placed it in the trash. Not in anger, in acknowledgement. That version of me had done the best she could with the information she had, but she was no longer in charge. The next test came unexpectedly. A voicemail from a number I hadn't blocked. Melissa. Her voice sounded different. Less sharp, more controlled. I'm pregnant, she said. I thought you should hear it from me. No accusation, no demand, just information. I waited a full day before responding. Congratulations. I wish you well. That was it. I didn't ask questions. I didn't offer help. I didn't insert myself into a future where I would once again be expected to absorb tension quietly. The old me would have rushed in, smoothed things over, tried to fix the unfixable. This version of me understood something new. Compassion does not require proximity. A week later, my father sent a final email. No subject line. I hope you're happy. I read it once. Then I archived it. Because happiness was never the goal. Clarity was. And clarity doesn't ask permission. The last real confrontation came not from them, but from a mirror. At a charity event my company sponsored, I caught my reflection in the bathroom. Black dress. Relaxed posture, eyes steady. I looked like someone who trusted herself. That startled me. For so long, I had outsourced my sense of rightness to other people, to family, to tradition, to expectations that were never negotiated, only inherited. Standing there, I realized how radical it was to live without asking myself how this would be received, without rehearsing explanations, without bracing. Later that night, Lydia pulled me aside. You've changed, she said, smiling, in a way that scares people. I raised an eyebrow. Is that a bad thing? She shook her head. Only for those who benefited from the old version. That was the final piece. Not everyone who resents your growth is your enemy. Some of them are just mourning the control they used to have. When I got home, I made a decision that felt small, but mattered more than any legal document I had signed. I deleted the family calendar I had kept out of habit. Birthdays, anniversaries, obligations. I kept the memories. I released the surveillance. That night, I slept without dreams. Deep, undisturbed, the kind of sleep that only comes when you're no longer preparing for impact. It would be about what I finally kept, and why choosing yourself, quietly and without apology, is the most permanent form of revenge there is. The morning I realized it was over, nothing dramatic happened. No message, no reminder, no familiar tightening in my chest. I woke up, stretched, and noticed my first thought wasn't about anyone else. It was about the day. That was how I knew. For most of my life, mornings have begun with assessment. Who might need me today? What mood I needed to manage? What silence I might have to translate later? Even when I lived alone, my mind still lived in their house. But that morning, the house was gone. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the city wake up. People heading to work, dogs pulling owners down the sidewalk, a delivery truck double-parked like it always did. Ordinary life moving forward without needing my permission. And for the first time, neither did I. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. That was the real ending. Not the legal documents, not the audit, not the restructuring. Grounded meant my feet were finally on my side of the line. Over the next few weeks, the echoes faded completely. No more accidental updates, no mutual friends fishing for reactions, no secondhand guilt disguised as concern. The story ended for them because I stopped narrating it. I kept the job. The promotion grew into something stable and respected. I led the way I always had, except now my authority was named instead of assumed. I built friendships that didn't depend on shared history or emotional debt. People who asked how I was, not what I could handle. I visited my grandmother's grave once in early summer. I didn't bring flowers. I brought quiet. I told her she had been right about all of it. The final realization came slowly, and then all at once. What my family called love had always come with conditions. Be useful, be quiet, be available, be smaller. And when I stopped agreeing to those terms, they didn't negotiate. They withdrew. That was the truth that hurt the most. And also the one that freed me. Because it meant I hadn't failed them. I had outgrown the role they assigned me. Revenge, in the way people imagine it, is loud. It demands witnesses. It needs someone to lose so you can feel like you've won. This wasn't that. This was quieter, colder, more final. I didn't destroy them. I removed myself from the system that fed on my silence. And once I did, the system rearranged itself without me. That's the part no one warns you about. When you stop absorbing dysfunction, the people who relied on it don't chase you forever. They look for another source. Or they shrink. Or they sit with what they avoided. Either way, it's no longer your work. I don't attend family holidays anymore. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. I don't explain my absence. I don't justify my peace. I understand now that being excluded from something toxic is not rejection. It's release. The inheritance I lost on paper was never mine to begin with. It came with too many strings, too many quiet expectations that required me to disappear to claim it. What I inherited instead was something far more valuable. Choice. I choose where I show up. I choose who has access. I choose what I carry forward, and I choose myself, even when no one is watching. That is the lesson I didn't learn until everything else was stripped away. Boundaries are not punishments. Silence is not cruelty. Walking away is not betrayal. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop negotiating your worth. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever been the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who held everything together while being told you were difficult for noticing the cracks, know this: you are not too much. You were just in a place that needed you to be less. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated, leave a comment and share where you're listening from. If you want to hear more stories about boundaries, betrayal, and quiet revenge, like and subscribe to the channel. Some tables don't need to be flipped. Some just need you to stand up and walk away. And when you do, everything changes.